What's up, Bombshells? Welcome to Bombshell 1111 Podcast, Therapy for Women of Color. My name is Keya, and I'm your host. Generally, podcasts request donations, but I want you to show love by simply subscribing to my social media platforms by visiting my website at www.bombshell1111podcast.com. I want to see thousands of subscribers on this platform. Leave your comments and I'll show love by shouting you out on my social media platforms such as Instagram and Facebook. I want to thank you for your continued support as always. And with that being said, let's jump into this new episode. Welcome to Bombshell 1111 Podcast, Therapy for Women of Color, where we discuss mental health and personal development. I'm Keya, and I'm your host. Tonight, we'll be talking about breaking mental health stigma with our special guest, Sue Bowles, Master Certified Life Coach. So let's get to it, Bombshells. Hi, Sue. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the podcast. I really love the work that you do, the things that you talk about, being that I also have my master's degree in mental health counseling. So I'm honored to have you come on the podcast and share your knowledge and your tools.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So, Sue, let's just hop right in. When people come on the podcast and I have guests on, I generally do a short bio to let the guests know what we're going to be talking about and who the guest is. But I also like to allow the guests to give a short bio themselves as well, to tell the audience a little bit about their background, who they are, where they're from, and what they do. So can you please give us a little short bio about who you are, where you're from, and what you do, Sue?
Sure. I am in Ohio, and I'm a Master Certified Life Coach, and I help stuck people get unstuck. I'm a hope coach, and I help them. We mine for hope. Nothing happens if you don't have hope. So I help adults who are trying to find something better for their lives, and help them find that and move forward with that. I also I do a lot of speaking. Obviously, do some podcasts. I had a book come out in 2019. I'm working on book number 2, but book number 1 actually won an award. So got second place in nonfiction at a book festival. So that was fun. And my main purpose is just to help people know it's okay to not be okay. And then to help break that stigma around mental health. But then I also want to empower people and help them realize that you only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. Because I think a lot of times we think we can't be of any use to anyone until we, quote unquote, have it all figured out, whatever that means. And my purpose is to help blow that out of the water.
And so, Sue, do you talk about any particular mental health illness or just mental health in general?
Mental health in general, but I also have some specific topics. I'm in recovery from an eating disorder, so I am very passionate about speaking about eating disorders and sharing my story about that, and helping educate about eating disorders, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about that. I was raised in an alcoholic home, so I certainly talk about those different family dynamics and the secrets and breaking free of those secrets. I've been suicidal twice. I'm a childhood rape survivor. So I also address areas of sexual assault and sexual assault survival, and not just the physical survival, but what it takes to survive emotionally and mentally after something like that. In my case, I was raped by a classmate when I was in first grade, and I didn't tell anyone until my senior year of college. So I've also worked on college campuses for 8 years. I have a master's in counseling college student development. So that age group, it has a near and dear place to my heart. And I love speaking to college groups and on college campuses as well.
Oh, wow. That's such an accomplishment. And you're a very courageous and a strong person to endure so much and to be able to share and discuss it, openly and relive it. That's very, very, very courageous. So I commend you for that too.
I appreciate that. And it's only been since about 2015 that I really started speaking out about it.
Oh, wow. Well, I definitely commend you. And you said a little bit about your book. You have an award-winning your first book, This Much I Know, The Space Between.
Yes.
What is that about?
That started out with one purpose, and it morphed into something else. And the book is my story. The concept is, this much I know is our story. Every person has a story, and that is the one thing no one can ever take from us. So this much I know is my story. And the second half of the book, The Space Between, talks about the healing journey that I went on to go from being wounded to finding healing and having scars. And I talk about that because when you have a wound, it's still bleeding, it's still fresh, it's still subject to infection, it needs to be protected. And when we're wounded, we protect ourselves in so many different ways. And I share all the story about how I started going from being wounded to the healing process that developed into scars. And now, scars are a story of hope for other people. And now I use my scars to share my story in hopes of encouraging others and to be that light for them in their darkness.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. And you also lead a organization, My Step Ahead, committing to breaking the stigma around mental health challenges. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, My Step Ahead is my business name. And the concept is what I just spoke about a minute ago. You only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. Where that all started was I was changing churches in 2015, and the pastor at the new church was talking about growth and development and discipleship and helping other people grow. And he posed the question, what's it take to help somebody else? And his answer was, you only have to be a step ahead. So the concept is that while I am reaching back, let me back up. All of us, as we go through things, it's on a continuum of support. So some things that I've been through, maybe someone else is just starting to go on, just starting their journey. For example, I'm in recovery from eating disorder. Maybe someone is just discovering they have an eating disorder or are struggling with that. Because I'm at least a step ahead of them, I can reach back and help them take their next step to getting help, to getting on the road to recovery. But that doesn't mean I have it all figured out. At the same time, I am reaching forward, and I have support from my dietitian and my counselor to help me in my continual recovery. And between the two ends of it all, we form a human chain of support. So my step ahead is simply to get out the truth that you don't have to have it all figured out to be able to help somebody else, that every person has something to offer right now, where they are, with wherever they are on their journey.
So Sue, let's dig right in. So we just gave a little background about who you are, what you do, and where you're from, and the types of services that you're able to provide individuals surrounding mental health. Let's jump into exactly what mental health is for those individuals who are trying to differentiate what mental health is. In your definition, what is a mental health condition?
I would say a mental health condition is anything that adversely affects mood, thinking, behavior, attitude, because those things stem from the things we tell ourselves in our minds. And when we are adversely having negative self-talk, conversations with ourselves that bring us down, experiences from other people that we then translate to conversations with ourselves, anything like that brings us down, has a negative influence on us, those for me are mental health issues, mental health conditions, challenges. It doesn't mean everything is a diagnosable mental health disorder, but we all have mental health that we need to attend to. And it could be as simple as liking ourselves, or being able to communicate to somebody else the value they have in our lives.
And what does stigma mean, and what does stigma look like?
And that's a great question. I think a stigma is some kind of a negative assumption. It's almost like you're making an assumption about someone or a group based on very limited information. So in this case, my purpose is to help break the stigma around mental health. If you think about it, mental health still has a lot of stigma around it because people don't understand, because they can't see the problem. They see the behavior, but they can't physically see the problem causing the behavior. So because of that, there's a lot of insecurity around that and disinformation around it, and it makes other people feel uncomfortable. And because of that, to make themselves feel more comfortable, they then place a stigma. They place kind of like a mark of disgrace. They place kind of like a scarlet letter on somebody. Oh, see, they don't have it all together. They're dealing with depression and they need to go see a counselor. Obviously, they don't have it all together and they need help, or they're sick. And it's like, no, not quite. There's absolutely nothing wrong with going to a counselor. And honestly, every person could probably use going to a counselor or a coach or something like that, because all of us have struggles. It doesn't always mean that it's to the extent where it is, goes into a diagnosable mental health disorder, but it doesn't mean we all don't struggle and we all need support.
And you kind of touched on the next question that I was going to ask you. Being a mental health advocate, what is the most common thing you hear from people living with mental health conditions?
Fear. Fear of what are other people going to think if they find out? What if I'm found out? Hey, I'm already struggling. How do I deal if my best friend suddenly finds out I need to see a counselor and she starts dragging all over me? Yeah. How am I going to handle that? I've already got enough going on. So, and sometimes that fear is paralyzing, that even though they have issues and struggles that they want help with and they want to get past, because of that fear, they stay chained to the situation where they are, and they can't break free because they're too afraid. And a lot of what I do is just encourage and motivate people. That's why I share my story. The more we talk about mental health, the more we make it an everyday topic of conversation, the less stigma there is, because more people are talking about it. A stigma comes about when people don't talk about things. Yeah. That's where the shame and the secrecy comes in. And a stigma usually has shame and secrecy attached to it.
Yeah. And because stigmatizing people with mental health has such negative consequences, as you just stated, what can we do to end stigma and discrimination against people living with mental health illnesses?
I think, first of all, realize that a lot of mental health conditions are biologically based. The brain is an organ, just like your heart is an organ, or your stomach, or your lungs. It's all an organ. And if something goes awry, you're going to have consequences from that. And I think if we can help break the stigma, if we educate ourselves that the brain is an organ and that mental health conditions are biologically based, and that trauma rewires your brain. It's scientifically proven. You can look it up on the internet of the brain scans that are done with someone having trauma versus someone who hasn't, or someone who's in recovery. It literally rewires your brain. But therapy, EMDR, anything that helps work through those events can then wire the brain correctly again. So I think as we educate ourselves and start to understand a little more that the brain is an organ, and when it has negative influences to it, it then shows its infection, if you want to use that word, to use an analogy, in different behaviors and different thought patterns. So I think one way we can break the stigma and end it, and with the discrimination and everything that goes with it, is simply educating ourselves, making it a topic of everyday conversation. I just did a pre-recorded session for actually it goes live next week, and it's October 18th. It's for the annual conference on advancing school mental health. And the session I did talked about how there's a study out where it showed that kids want their parents involved in their lives and they don't know how to ask for it. So my presentation was geared towards parents and adults and helping them learn how to, and equipping them in how to make talking about mental health a part of everyday conversation, and equipping them with that. And I think those are two big ways that we can really put a dent in this stigma, is just by making it a part of everyday conversation, no matter where you are.
Yeah. And speaking of that, culture does play a role in stigma. And I specifically can say that from experience within the African American culture, because if someone within the African American culture has a mental health illness, sometimes it is kind of swept under the rug because the family doesn't want the community to know, or the family doesn't want that individual, that family member, to be labeled as crazy. So everything that you're saying is like hitting the nail right on the head. And I wanted to ask you, in your professional opinion, what role can culture play in this stigma with mental health?
I think you just addressed it. The family culture, the family structure, the work environment, all of those things can come into play. I have an opportunity to do a mental health minute at a warehouse every week, and it's just a 5-minute thing where we talk about different aspects of mental health. This week we're going to talk about rest, and people don't associate rest with mental health, and there's more to rest than just sleeping. There's emotional, physical, and spiritual rest, and talking about how all those come into play. So culture can play a big role in it. Does the work environment allow for some kind of mental health programming? College campuses in particular have numerous opportunities for mental health programming. End of February is National Eating Disorders Awareness Week. I would love to have my calendar so packed out because people want to talk about eating disorders that week. There's so much that culture can do. The familiar culture, yes, in the family, and some of it, again, is just understanding, and sometimes it takes one brave person to step out of the mold. And at the same time, we need people of all ethnicities and all backgrounds to be in the mental health field, so that people see others who look like them and talk like them and sound like them and understand things that other ethnic groups couldn't be able to understand as well, because that alone will also go a large way of starting to break down the stigma, because then suddenly it's not just somebody who's supposed to be saying it, but it's somebody that I can actually relate to.
And so this kind of comes to the end of the close for the podcast. And I generally like to ask the question, is there anything else that you like to share? Anything that you felt like we didn't talk about that we need to talk about? But just with listening to you and, of course, reading your bio, I really would like to close out the podcast with you leaving the audience with some techniques, strategies, or tips, specifically because you share your stories and you talk about multiple traumas, but specifically childhood rape and eating disorders. For individuals that may potentially be experiencing that or trying to heal from that in some form or fashion, what advice would you give individuals in both areas in reference to childhood rape and eating disorder?
You can't do it alone. I tried for decades. It wasn't until 2014 that I finally started dealing with my rape that happened 4 decades ago. You cannot do it alone. That is the biggest message I will send out and herald with a trumpet, because it wasn't until I started to implode. Remember how I talked about how the mental struggles inside the chemistry changes will come out in different ways? Mm-hmm. Mine came out through the eating disorder. The eating disorder is a mental health issue. Mine came out, the trauma of the rape came out through the eating disorder.
Okay.
Eating disorders, we can have a whole separate conversation about eating disorders. But just briefly, eating disorders are not about food. They're about control and trying to control emotions that you can't control. So I would say, in terms of listeners who are struggling or know people who are struggling, you cannot do it alone. Yeah. And you're not designed to do it alone. And the first step, and I say this every time I speak, the first step is having the courage to pick up the phone. And I will say this, if you don't know who to call me. And I'm dead serious about that. Email me, reach out to me in some way, and I will help connect you with someone in your area that can help get you on the path that you want to go on and you don't know how to get there.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate you for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge and tools. So this was so powerful for me because I know a lot of men and young women definitely struggle with these things and don't know where or who to turn to. And sometimes, like you said, they deal with it for so long and still don't know who to turn to. And with you offering that, I think that is so gracious. So thank you so much for that. And in saying that, can you provide the listeners with your social media platforms and contact information in case there is someone listening that would like to contact you?
Yes, I was going to do that. Your best way to get in touch with me is to go to SueBowles.com. And I imagine Keya will put it in the message notes, but it's SueBowles.com. You can also find My Step Ahead on Facebook, Instagram. Then you also go to mystepahead.com and there's contact information there. So any number of ways. And again, if you didn't catch any of those, get a hold of Keya, comment on it, and when she posts this, and she'll make sure that we get the information to you, because I am serious about that. There is no greater privilege I have than to help someone get on their road to healing, because I know what it took for me to get there, and it is not something to be gone through alone.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. So you guys, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks to Sue for joining us. We hope that you were able to hear something beneficial to you. If you enjoyed our show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to come back and join us next time. And with that being said, you guys, always remember, you are born within your own shell. Peace, love, and light. Good night, you guys. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. Rate, review, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're leaving with some valuable information that can help you on your personal journey. Also, check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Bombshell 1111 or at Bombshell 1111 TV. You can also check out our mental health page, Your Health is Your Wealth, on Facebook, which is a page created to inform and support individuals with mental health and other health conditions. And with that being said, always remember, you guys, you are a bomb within your own shell. And until next time, peace, love, and light.